Good morning. What a great day. It's going to be a little warm, so we're going to enjoy ourselves inside today. And hopefully we won't have the rain. John McQuiston, thank you for that splendid introduction. And thanks to all of our tremendous leadership here at AUSA and all that you do for us every day, truly making a difference, and we cannot thank you enough. Let me thank in advance Dr. Jetty, who agreed to be our keynote speaker. He'll join us a little later this afternoon, but he often reminds me that what the L stands for in AT and L, and he's a great supporter of all things logistics, and I know that he'll have some great comments of his impact and how he sees the future of logistics as we go forward, and we really appreciate him joining us today. Again, I have to recognize John Wagner, sir. Thank you so much. For your leadership, for your presence, your example. You are the blueprint of what right looks like. So thank you again for your leadership. Please join me in another applause for Joe Wagner. Thank you, sir. I'd like to recognize some of my battle buddies who may not be here quite yet, but I think they're going to join us en route. John Hokinson, John Latrosky, John Bingham, I think is going to join us, and all of our general officers that are here, and especially those members of our panel. Thank you for being here today. In particular, I'd like to point out our moderators, John Stevenson and John Weiss, both mentors and great friends, continue to mentor me every day, and I need that a good bit. So thanks to both of them. All of our industry partners. I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of our relationship, but I know the chief, the vice, the secretary, the under, and other senior leaders often talk about the nature and the criticality of our relationship. It only grows stronger as we go forward. So thank you for what you do for us, and thank you for your presence here today. I'd like to acknowledge my battle buddies. First, my Sergeant Major, who goes with me everywhere, kind of keeps me out of trouble to the best of his ability. And Sergeant Major Bell, the G-4, Sergeant Major, thank you for being here. And, of course, my deputy, Mr. Moore, who's my right-hand man and instrumental in the success that we've had in our logistics community. So thank you both. And a special welcome to everyone that's tuning in live online. Thank you. I'm thinking enough of our presentations and the panel and discussion that we're going to have to spend a bit of your time with us as we talk about what we think are important for our Army, logistics and sustainment. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. At the Hot Topic last year, I provided an update on where we were with Army sustainment and where we're heading. Today, I'd like to focus primarily on the latter and focus on the future as I see it of Army logistics. While the nature of war may remain constant, we are in the midst of a fundamental change in the character of war. Some of you have heard John Milley talk about this changing character of war. Disparate elements of the operational environment are converging, and technological innovation is occurring at unprecedented speed, nothing like we've seen in recent history. The way our forces operate alongside our allies and partners in the future will be radically different than what we've experienced in the past. This will challenge our perspectives as logisticians and our way of doing business as we go forward. And we must understand this web of factors and relationships to help shape the future of sustainment and the character of war as a whole. But there's no doubt in my mind that the Army of 2028 will be ready to deploy, to fight, and win against any adversary at any time and anywhere. And as logisticians, from the strategic to the tactical, we must be agile, resistant, resilient, effective, and more efficient. The bottom line is we have to be ready whenever our nation needs us. So our two panels today are geared toward these objectives. First, John Stevenson will host our first panel, Delivering Capability at the Point of Need, and I know that should generate a good bit of discussion. And then secondly, John Weiss will be our moderator for our second panel, Expanding the Competitive Space, Sustainment for the Future Fight. So I'd ask you to start articulating and thinking through your tough questions. Make sure you hold your tough questions for those two panels, okay? But before we get those discussions started, I want to look at sustaining the future from the Army staff perspective. Readiness remains our number one priority. And at the strategic level, the entire sustainment enterprise is working to posture ourselves for future success. Personnel, material, and equipment will be required on the future battlefield, but at scale, pace, and duration significantly greater than we've seen ever before. For logisticians, it's all about the strategic support area, the space where we generate combat power, project it, and ultimately where we sustain it. Now, John Prana was here just a few months ago, and he outlined that we're ahead to operationalize the strategic support area, and we on the Army staff are moving out accordingly. Our doctrine must also evolve to ensure combatant commanders have options that enable freedom of action, operational reach, and prolonged endurance. With the publication of FM 3.0 operations a year and a half ago, the Army moved from a contingent counterinsurgency focus to large-scale ground combat operations. The sustainment community has changed also to meet this new focus. So in the past year, our own CASCOM commander, General Rodney Fogg, and the great CASCOM team has done a tremendous amount of work in FM 4.0, our comprehensive doctrinal framework for sustainment. I think Rodney will talk a little bit more about that, and I'd ask you to ask him about 4.0, and his team has done some phenomenal work, and I thank you, Rodney, for your leadership in that particular area. When we think about sustainment operations, we have to make sure we understand what the terms mean. It's not just logistics. In the new 4.0, it brings the other three elements of sustainment as well: financial management, personnel services, and health services support on the battlefield. We're also ensuring our doctrine is forward-looking. How can we enable our corps and divisions to become more of a fighting organization than just a headquarters? The future operating environment requires the echelonment of capabilities. We're exploring assigning different sustainment capabilities to the corps and divisions, and making Theater Sustainment Command, Expeditionary Sustainment Command, and Sustainment Brigade commanders responsible for integrating sustainment at echelon. Building on that, Lieutenant General Lundy, our CAT commander at the Combined Arms Center, conducted an assessment on how the Army fights and how we can become a MDO, multi-domain operation-ready force. We found that fuel distribution on the battlefield will be a challenge. Not a new challenge, but continues to be a significant challenge for us as we go forward, both line haul and tactical distribution in the close fight. Mobility is another challenge. We don't have the right amount of both tactical mobility for units and our commodities, and we have to be able to move faster. So we're working through these options, and we think we have a good plan, a good way ahead to address those challenges. And with several years of force reductions and grade plate roll downs, our formations has atrophied when it comes to material management and higher echelon maintenance. So we're taking a holistic look at the capabilities we need to put back into our brigade support battalions and our sustainment brigades to be able to execute forward on the battlefield. We're also ensuring the sustainment stays integrated with the great work that the Army Futures Command are doing down in Austin. Rather than creating stovepipe logistics efforts with our own cross-functional teams, we have sustainers embedded in each of the CFTs. We've made this a priority, and we've hand-selected to ensure that we've selected the right individual with the right skills and talents to ensure they can advocate and account for sustainment as we build this new capability for our future Army. At the tactical level, I constantly raise the need to utilize today's technology today. This is kind of my buzzword, I guess, taking advantage of today's technology today. But the truth of the matter is we're still in catch-up mode in a lot of areas, and we're not there yet. We're not even at today. So how do we get there? Let me give you an example. Now, maintenance, and some of you have heard this before, so I apologize if you've heard me say this, but it's still a great example of where I think we need to leap ahead with respect to our technology. Our maintenance support devices, which are critical pieces of equipment to diagnose and repair equipment, is a perfect example. Our IG, as they were out, found that the majority of our units did not have the latest software update on that device. So why is that? So I will tell you that if we have to update our maintenance support device today, we have to send out an old CD-ROM. And if we send out that CD-ROM, we have to hope that we have the right mailing address to the right unit. Let's assume we have the right mailing address. It has to get to the right clerk. And if it makes it far enough to get to the right clerk, we hope that that clerk has the authority to shut down the system, because it's going to require a complete shutdown of all the systems to update this software. And if all things work perfectly and that system is updated, I have no visibility in the Army of what system has been updated. But I have an iPhone. Most of you have a smart device. And just last week I got a text saying, hey, there's a latest iOS update available. And all I have to do is plug it into my charger and ensure that I'm signed in to the Wi-Fi, and it's automatic. And my IT people in my office, if I don't update my phone in a week, will come knocking on my door and say, hey, sir, the iOS update is out there. You haven't updated your phone yet. When are you going to update your phone? They have complete visibility of every phone in the government, but yet and still a critical piece of equipment that we have that perform routine maintenance on our equipment, we have no visibility. That's not taking advantage of today's technology today. More importantly, how do we get past today and to a point where we're looking at 2028 and beyond? It starts with industry and everyone here in our room today. If you look at the last 100 years, the military innovation and advancement, you'll see that the first 50 years of the last century was led by military innovation and advancement. And you'll see that in the last 50 years, it's been led by industry and their technology advancement. The role has reversed. First 50 years led by the federal government. And if you look at the amount of money spent by industry in R&D over the last 50 years, it's been led by more than double by industry, our industry partners. My point is that we can't do this on our own. We have to work together as a team. We've made great progress in recent years, but it's only the beginning. Across the sustainment enterprise, our doors are open, and we continue to work with our industrial partners, and we thank you for that. Now, a few weeks ago, I was at Fort Lee, and John Fogg allowed me to speak to one of the captain's career courses. These pre-command captains right out of their first assignment. And one of the young captains raised their hand, stood up after I talked about some of the challenges that we have in the logistics community, and he proclaimed he had the answers for all Army sustainment challenges. So Sergeant Major and I looked at each other and we said, this should be pretty good. And you know what he said? Why isn't there an app for that? And sure, we all chuckled and we kind of looked at each other, but the young captain was kind of prepared. He urged us to think about the power of our soldiers. If our soldiers had the capability of our GCSS Army, our fundamental material management capability, if we had an app on our individual soldier phones. I just talked about that. You know, today I can scan a QR code with my phone, and within seconds, that item will be ready for me to buy with one click. And until that item arrives at my home 2 days later, I have full visibility of where it's located the entire time. And I have that capability right in the palm of my hand in my phone. So think of the improvements to our inventory processes and accountability if we had that capability. That captain isn't the only one who has raised this idea. There are many factors weighing on bringing this to fruition, like cybersecurity. In a multi-domain environment, we understand what those challenges present. But this is the kind of thinking we need from our future leaders and from our entire Army. We have to get after applying tomorrow's technology for our today's issues. We're not far from that goal, as you may think. Our friends in the G1, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, have developed an app for their new integrated personnel and pay system, Army IPS-A. Soldiers can now securely access their personnel records and perform routine tasks previously required an in-person trip to their G1 or S1. Self-service transactions are automated, paper-free, trackable from initiation to approval, all from the comforts of their phone. And on the security piece, I recently toured one of our industrial partners' facilities, and I was blown away by their cyber capabilities. When we went from room to room, their computers automatically changed configurations depending on the requisite classification level of those of us that was in the tour. It went from top secret to unclassified and back without human intervention. It was all automated based on information that was input. Very impressive. That exists today. So my question is, why can't we do that same in our facilities? I use our G-Army app on our soldiers' phones, as that young captain had recommended. Autonomous distribution is another example we must think about. Next Thursday marks the 75th anniversary of D-Day. When those brave troops stormed Normandy, they quickly learned what we all know, that they couldn't move inland without their supplies. Moving supplies by rail was not an option. The Allies had destroyed the French rail system to stop the Germans from supplying their own forces, so the only option was truck convoys. One thing that I'm most proud of, and my father was one of those drivers on the famed Red Ball Express. The need was so great. Thank you. The need was so great that they had over 6,000 trucks on the road, each driving no faster than 25 miles per hour, pushing supplies to the front line, over 350 miles one way. And as you would expect, the trucks took a tremendous beating. Overheated engines, burned out motors, worn out tires. Soldiers would put sandbags on the floors of the cabs to absorb the mine blast. Sounds like something we did about 20 years ago. But it didn't stop them. General Patton, commander at that time, all he wanted them to do was eat, sleep, and drive, but mostly drive. And did they ever? Contributing, in my mind and my father's mind, contributing as much to the defeat of the Nazi unit as any other unit. My father was so proud to be part of Patton's Army, and I'm honored to be part of that legacy as we look toward our version of the Red Ball Express in the future. Now consider all the casualties we've taken in Iran and Afghanistan. Many were on logistics patrols, simply going from point A to point B to deliver supplies and not some sort of offensive combat operations. With autonomous systems, we could load up our supplies, program the map, and the satellite system would guide them to their destination. The vehicle might get hit, we might lose some fuel or some rations, but we keep our soldiers out of harm's way. Without soldiers on board, it requires less armor. Less armor means decreased weight, which means increased capacity, better fuel efficiency, faster and more agile delivery. Whether it's leader-follower or fully autonomous systems, the highways and byways on the United States are already buzzing with these systems. Again, taking advantage of today's technology today. So I just recently found out that even students just down the road at George Mason can have their coffee and donuts delivered across campus each morning by a secure, temperature-controlled robot. I understand that the thing can change its own battery. That sounds pretty nice inside Major. I change its own battery. Along that same line of thinking, we're also transforming our soldiers' equipping process, how they deliver their equipment, personal equipment kit. From the examples of our industrial partners leading the way, we are working towards technology-driven direct delivery to a single individual kit to our soldiers. In doing so, we are streamlining the procurement and distribution processes and reducing both excess inventory and our brick and mortar footprint. Again, progress. Most importantly, we are giving valuable time back to our commanders and drill instructors for training. The Sergeant Major of the Army Daily says 8 hours can be the difference in a soldier going from marksman to expert in weapons qualifications. It's efforts like these that are directly contributing to our soldiers' lethality. Finally, we are putting a tremendous focus on evolving our maintenance operations to restore material readiness. For decades, we've expended resources, man-hours, and repair parts to conduct maintenance services while based on predetermined time intervals. But you know, just like my wife, she's raised by her father, who was a command sergeant major. And he taught her to change her oil every 6 months of 6,000 miles. Even if she drives 600 or 60 miles, she has me changing oil every 6 months. Now, years ago, I replaced General McQuiston in the command of 21st TSC, and she and her husband sent us pictures of the beautiful home that we were going to be moving into. The home was nice, but what really caught my attention was that car they had parked outside. It was a BMW. Now, I actually bought one of those BMW as I followed my mentor. The point that I'm making is that I never changed the oil on that BMW until I got a text where it had forwarded information to the BMW dealership, and they sent me a text saying, hey, we got a little notification from your car saying there may be some irregularities in your oil. How about bringing it in and let's check it out, see if you need to exchange the oil. First time I changed the oil in that vehicle was 2 years. The next time, 2 years later. So should we be doing it every 6 months, 6,000 miles, or only when the car requires it? That's technology today. I believe that with condition-based maintenance data that we've collected, it's clear that there are areas where we are over-servicing our equipment today in the Army, and I think you all would agree with that. So if weapon systems are not engaged in combat operations, we're looking to extend our scheduled services to align more closely with actual usage, with no risk to safety or readiness. This will give time, our most precious resource, and money back to units that can be used elsewhere to increase readiness. We're also revitalizing our maintenance regeneration enablers to help maintain readiness at the theater and corps level. By combining the operational readiness and ready repair cycle floats, the new, more effective Strategic Readiness Float Program, or SRF, will leverage current capabilities within our organic industrial base. This will ensure the SRF assets are in the ready state to provide commanders the equipment they need and when they need it. Not like those old off tanks that were in my motor pool when I was a battalion commander that was never operational the entire 2 years I was in command. So as we look to the future, the bottom line is we have more work to do. The logistics will be contested in every domain in the new battle space. But we're making progress. We are making progress. And we are lucky that one of the biggest fans of sustainment is the person that you want in your camp, and that's General Milley. If you haven't already, I'd urge you to read the latest version of the Army Sustainment magazine. You can go online, go to the G-4 website, go to the CASCOM website, and just pull it up, the Army Sustainment magazine. And for the first time in history, now I know we have a couple of other Army G4s in here, so I think it's the first time in history. General Stevenson will correct me. But the Chief of Staff sat down for an in-depth interview talking about sustainment. And he explains, for the United States military, sustainment is fundamental to win a sustained land campaign against any serious adversary. We will be ready now and ready to sustain in the future. So I know Joan Stevenson and Joan Weiss will generate a fantastic discussions later for us today, and I'm looking forward to that panel discussion. Thank you again for all being here, for your partnership, and everything that you do for our Army. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to some of your questions.
I'll kick things off, and here's a few for you right here. Okay. But the first question is, you mentioned that industry is going to play or should play a vital role in the future of what you're doing. As you know, we've got a number of industry here in the room. Is there anything specifically that they can do to help you in the future? Well, I think, and to a large degree, they're doing it. Communications. And I know that I have talked personally with a number of you. You've talked to my staff. You've come in and you've showed us some of the latest and greatest capability, techniques, procedures that you have out there. I would ask you to continue to do that. Invite us to your locations. I've visited a lot of your locations as well, and I've seen firsthand. I talked a little bit about in my presentation what I've seen firsthand, some of that extreme capability. Again, my priority is taking advantage of today's technology today, and that's what you all are doing every day. And that relationship is no more important than it is today. So continue to communicate with us, share with us your innovative ideas. We invite you to come show them with us, invite us to your locations, and I think we will only get better as we grow together as we go forward, and I appreciate those relationships. Okay. Tell us about strategic readiness float. Is a concept our reality? When will it be fully operational? So we're in the process of transitioning from our old systems to the new. It's in the process of being approved. John Perna has approved it. It's working through the deep dive process that you're all familiar with. At the end of the day, you got to program dollars. We think that we can limit the acquisition amount by consolidating our float resources at AMC, controlled by AMC, maybe at forward locations, not necessarily at our depots, but managed by our depots. We think we'll have a greater repair pod availability, and we have trained mechanics to sustain that equipment. Unlike when I talked about that tank in my battalion motor pool as a battalion commander, I never had enough tank mechanics to perform the maintenance on the deadline vehicles that I had that were assigned to units, let alone the operational readiness float that was just hanging out in the corner. So the goal is to have the industrial base maintain, sustain this equipment, ensure that they're ready. We'll have sufficient repair parts on hand so that as we float and transition an item to an operational unit, we quickly can surge both personnel and repair parts, so we can bring that back to a operational readiness standard, unlike what we've done in the past. So it's a little bit of a new technique, a new capability, managed by Army Material Command, owned by them, the maintenance performed by depot personnel, which is different how we did it at the operational level in the past. Not fully approved by the Secretary, but we're comfortable that we'll get that done in the next 30 days or so. Speaking of taking advantage of technology, when are we going to enable our smartphones to be used to do the things like inventories and feed results on the count of G-Army? So I talked a little bit about that. Our IPSA already has that capability. Working through with our G6 brothers and sisters, cyber continues to be a concern. That's our biggest challenge to overcome. I will tell you that the Secretary was down visiting the 82nd Airborne earlier this year and visited a supply room, an arms room, and a supply room. And the amount of equipment, some of you are former infantry or combat arms soldiers, the amount of equipment has grown significantly when you were running a company maintenance arms room and supply room. The division commander said, hey, we need some technology to help us inventory this equipment. So what we're doing, we're out looking with our industry partners, developing requirements or capability that can automatically inventory. We'll log in with our CAT card, so we'll have ownership. We will use ID tags on each of our individual pieces of equipment. We'll be able to scan that, RFID tag, scan that as it comes in and out of those either supply rooms or arms room, and we will have real-time visibility and inventories of what's in and what's out of each one of our arms rooms and supply rooms. We're going to pilot that later this year, and if all goes well, we'll incorporate that into G-Army. An example of a capability that exists today that we're trying to take advantage of. We found some capability in the New Zealand Army that does this today. So again, we're transitioning. We think we're well on our way. And just one example of how we think we can facilitate inventories using technology and better improve our ability to conduct those inventories.
Sir, we have another question from the audience. What's your sense of where the Army is with respect to additive manufacturing? Ahead of industry, lagging industry, or way ahead?
Lagging industry. We're making improvement. As you all know, we stood up a Center of Excellence at Rock Island where they're going to manage additive manufacturing for the entire Army. I've visited GE, who's doing some exceptional work today, and I'd ask you to ask Mr. Mathis about that. I've heard a lot of rumors where no additive manufactured part is being used on an aircraft. Well, I found that to be just blatantly not true. That capability exists, being done today. We are not taking advantage of that. Now, we have some fabrication kits. We have an example of a kit in Korea where we are 3D printing small numbers of parts. When we find those parts and we have the intellectual property approved from industry, we print those parts and we build a database. But we are only, I would tell you, up to about 250 parts that we have in our database that's been approved to print using our limited 3D capability that we have out there. But an example that I talked about this last week when I was in Hawaii, they had over 150 MRAPs that were down for a nut that's part of the fire suppression system on the wheels of the MRAPs. This nut cost $2.50. They ordered those nuts. They needed over 1,500, and they found that our backlog was over 6 months. It would take 6 months to get these 1,500 $2.50 nuts. They took it to this fabrication capability that we have in Korea. In the span of 4 days, they printed these 1,500 $2.50 nuts, and we were able to get those MRAPs back into the fight in operational condition. That's taking advantage of that capability that's out there. And again, I know a lot of our industrial partners have that capability. As I talked about, I saw it at GE when I visited. So we are lagging behind our industry partners, but we're taking advantage of what their expertise has proven to be successful. Our biggest challenge continues to be the intellectual property, and we're working with our industry partners, and I think we're all on the same sheet. Our lawyers are working that hard, and we think we are making progress. But we're not where we need to be, but we're making progress, and we're driving forward with expanding our capability that we do have in our Army today.
So we've got one more question. Given the threat from Korea, what is the future of Army watercraft?
So there's been no final decision on Army watercraft. As you may know, that the Pacific is expanding their requirements for watercraft. The Army's position is that we look for the COCOM commander to state their requirement, and then the entire Department of Defense ought to meet those requirements, not just Army watercraft. We have requirements in CENTCOM. I know most of you have served in the CENTCOM area where we use Army watercraft there. We use watercraft in PACOM extensively, and we think as we look toward Indo-PACOM of the future, and in a multi-domain operations, those requirements for watercraft capability will only grow. So we think that there's a future for watercraft in the Army, not to the extent it is today. Unfortunately, the watercraft that we have has reached, or will soon reach, the end of its useful life. So we have a limited program in place to replace some of those watercrafts. We are refurbishing some to a degree. But we understand the requirements in PACOM. We're working with PACOM to identify those requirements, but we are looking to use not just Army watercraft, but watercraft in general for all of other services to meet that PACOM requirement as well.
Sir, thank you again for being here. Let's give General Piggee a big round of applause.